a Microsoft office that I've actually never been in. So welcome to everybody. Today we're actually going to talk a little bit about women in STEM. We've got some startling statistics to share, and we're going to have some good conversation about some ideas from these amazing women who are currently working in STEM. So to kick it off, I'm going to throw out a few names. Ada Lovelace, Rosalind Franklin, Barbara McClelnick, Dorothy Hodgkin. Does anyone recognize any of these names?
Yes.
Awesome. Because in full transparency, I asked people around me when I got this list, and too many of them actually had no idea who they were. And it reminded me of a video that Microsoft put out a few years ago where we asked young people to name inventors, and they could only name male inventors. So it really struck a chord with me. Anyway, since about 1903, there's only been about 22 female Nobel laureates, compared with 601 men across physics, math, and science. So some startling statistics. When it comes to researchers, fewer than 30% are women. And when it comes to women who are enrolled in post-secondary, it's about 30% that are in STEM, and that number actually drops to about 3% when you look at the number of women in ICT, which is information, communications, and technology. So while I'd say, we talk a lot, especially in the tech industry, we talk a lot about the progress we've made. The reality is we have just not made enough, and there's a hell of a lot more to do. And so we're here today to talk about some ideas of how we're going to do that. I'm going to introduce the panel. So here we have Meghan. She's the SVP of Marketing from Loblaw, so fellow Canadian. Great to have you here. The next person is Angie. She's the Dean of NYU. Then we have Elizabeth, who's our rock star 16-year-old inventor with the United Nations Foundation. Welcome, Elizabeth. Great to see you. Our next panelist is Emily. She's the SVP of, and I didn't get the unit that you're in at.
Power products.
Power products. Cool. What exactly is that, just for a second?
Well, we power the buildings of America with our electrical equipment.
Amazing, amazing. And then last but not least, we have AnneMarie, who works for the Department of Energy. So amazing leaders. We're going to kick it off. We've got a bunch of questions, and then we're hopefully going to have a bit of time for some Q&A. So Elizabeth, I'm going to start with you. The reality is that women and girls are disproportionately affected by a lot of global challenges. And at the same time, they've got a lot of unique experiences, they've got unique perspectives. And so in order to realize a more socially just and economically inclusive and sustainable future, we really have to make sure that they have equal progress towards their career goals and that we're actually investing in them in STEM. And so I'm curious from your perspective as a young woman, what do you think we need to do to actually drive more women and encourage them more and drive a little bit more equity?
Yes, so of course I'm 16, so I'm a senior in high school, so I speak from a youth kind of perspective and what exactly can we do to have more women in STEM, and exactly why that's important to begin with. And for me, what I've always found has been kind of the biggest driving factor is seeing all of these different areas of STEM and technology applied to ways that I think would be interesting to use and interesting kind of to make change with the world. So I started a computer science class my very first year in high school. One, I didn't love it very much, but I later found out that was because perhaps there was a learning curve that I just wasn't getting over, and I didn't really feel like supported in that space. But the same kind of exact second that I felt like I was applying into things that I liked, so let's say sociology, stuff to do with gender, I loved that class so much more, and I found so many different areas in which I could use it to kind of make the change that, let's say, I wanted to see. So I think that kind of the biggest part and the biggest way that we can get young girls and young people into STEM and into technology is by helping them see that technology is so much more than kind of what exactly we're seeing. Like in school, they're telling you, you can become a software engineer, you can run a company. There's nothing applicable to, let's say, the change that these young girls are facing in their communities and the intersectional experiences that they have and want to work with. So I think that kind of the biggest point to make is telling them that we have these unique experiences, and by utilizing STEM and technology, you can change in that way.
So I'm curious, so how many people, when you say you were in computer science, how many other women, young girls were in your class with you?
Yes, so the very first class, everyone was required to take this kind of introduction class. It was one semester, and then you get on to the electives. And by the last elective, which I guess is the hardest computer science class, I was one girl and there were 40 people in the class. And then aside from that, there was absolutely no one who had the same skin tone as me. So that was it's a pretty difficult class, and that's what everyone knows. Then maybe that might have been the reason, but at the end of the day, there just were not anywhere close to enough women in that class.
Yeah, that's sad. Okay, so I'm going to turn this one over to you, AnneMarie. There you go. Can you share ideas or things you've seen, innovations, inspirations, any kind of examples of why it actually really is critical for women to be in STEM?
No, thanks so much. So since this is a UN General Assembly side event, wanted to just mention that fifth Sustainable Development Goal is for gender equity. And I think that's really a linchpin for all other 16 goals, because when you have women who are involved at every level, we get things done. So I think that that's really important to set the tone here for the whole conversation. And thank you to the World Women's Foundation for having us all over. So one of the big things for the Department of Energy is our goals for reaching net zero emissions by 2050, a fully electric power sector by 2035. And these are like big, hairy, audacious goals that we need women at the leadership levels and all the way down, right? So you look at the Department of Energy, where I work, we have the Secretary of Energy, Jennifer Granholm. She is a true powerhouse. If you have not seen her in action, just follow her on LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever, because she is an absolute, if she was not born in Canada, I'd say watch out for her to be the future president of the United States. Like, she's just
Like a prime minister.
Right. Psyched to be seen. I like that. And so underneath that we have the national, well, actually it's like in parallel, we have the National Nuclear Security Administration, also led by a woman. Jill Ruby, she was with one of our former national weapons labs. The Department of Energy is like a really complex space where you have our national nuclear whole non-proliferation, powering the nuclear navy, making sure there's not nuclear proliferation of materials around the globe. Huge important mission. To give you a sense of that budget, it's about $21.4 billion. And so I think it's really telling that we have a woman in charge over there. And then we have program offices, which a lot of the Department of Energy's program offices are led by women. We have 2 national labs led by women, but there's 17, right? So we just have a lot more space to see more gender equity in the energy sector. But these women who are leading these offices, they are in charge of this huge energy transition that we're underway right now. And we're going to see a lot of change. We have the people at the top who want to get it done. We have the budget, thanks to a lot of different acts of Congress recently, the Infrastructure Investment Act and the Science and Chips Act and a whole host of other measures. So I'm just really excited to see that. And then on our partnership side, I wanted to give a shout out to our clean energy program. It's called C3Es, and in partnership with MIT, Stanford, and Texas A&M. And it's really dynamic work where you can see they have a host of awardees, ambassadors, and a national symposium every year. And the awardees are people to watch. If you ever need people to come out to your events who are like, powerhouses in clean energy, check out their list of awardees, because those are absolutely incredible people. You see people like Milo Werner, who was at Tesla for 7 years and now is a venture capitalist. And you can just pull from that for any future events you may have. But so those are people who I'm inspired by. I would encourage you to look at their website and check them out. Thanks.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so you're all leading women in STEM, but I'm going to bug 2 of you. I'm curious, Angie and then Meghan. 2-part question. What do you envision for #EqualFuture for women? And then secondly, what do you or your organization or both, what do you do to unlock the potential of women in STEM?
Sure, I'll take a swing at that. So thanks again to the foundation for hosting us. So this is a really sticky problem, right? So multivariable problems require very multi-layered solutions, right? And so I come from a family of engineers, and so what we do, probably what you've done, Elizabeth, is you figure out your end goal and then you reverse back into what you want. And so I think when I think about all the variables that we want to change, and the last panel was fantastic, I think we have to push on a lot of levers. And so I think everything from ESG, where we want to think about governance and make sure that 50% of every board includes women, I think we have to push hard on that. I think by 2025, we have to push hard on wage equity and wage parity. I think we have to push really hard on the pipeline issues. Women go, and so I work at New York University, women are much more represented. 60% of women are going to post-secondary, yet we're not represented in the STEM fields. And so we really have to address that part. So I look a lot at the data that we want to really push on. We have to think about what's happening in our middle schools and our high schools as well. And so I think other pieces, so I think that we have to pick a number of goals in a bunch of different dimensions, because I think we cannot program our way out of a system problem. We've got a system problem here, and I'm not satisfied by saying there's a pipeline issue at the front end, let's work at the front end. We really have to work at all angles. So I think that that's an important piece of it. and concurrently, right? So push those boards to have equal representation and push middle schools and elementary schools to really think differently about what we teach. Real quick, as I think about kind of what we can do as educators, it's not just making classes more accessible, we have to make classes more accessible. It's not just about kind of taking the high stakes out and kind of offering internships early and often, but it is about those things. I think one of the biggest pieces that we have to do is understand that in STEM, we actually have a teacher shortage. One of the biggest constraints is if we want to really push and kind of go from 3% or 6%, depending on the area of women are in computer science, there's a real constraint in terms of faculty to teach in these areas. And so again, I think that we have to deconstruct the problems to understand, but I'd say making sure that we've got applied learning, making sure we've got the technical skills, making sure that we've got social capital building, mentoring programs, making sure that we have access to work experience is really important, but also look at some of the root causes. And if we don't actually get more instructors in these areas, it's going to be really hard if we can energize more students like Elizabeth to come. We really are going to have a problem kind of producing the talent at the other end.
And just a clarifying question, is it that we don't have enough instructors or we don't have enough female instructors to act as role models, or is it both?
Both.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so again, if we're going to do a lot of work to energize young adults in terms of careers in STEM, and I always think about it's really much more STEAM in terms of creation, we really have to make sure that we've got those role models, and role models in classrooms are really important. So I'm going to take a guess, what was the gender of your teacher? And so that's I think an incredibly important point and not to be underestimated.
Thanks.
That's such a good answer. I might just talk a little bit about the same thing, actually, because I do believe the problem exists at all levels. And so in a corporation, and certainly where I work at Loblaw, we are tackling it at the recruiting. So how do we make sure we have diverse slates, bringing people in, getting to 50-50 representation at entry level. But I think what we all know is that one of the most critical issues is actually the move between entry level and manager. And actually about 50 women are promoted for every 100 men. It's significant, it's a significant broken rung. And so we have to also think about what are we doing in terms of advancing women to that next level and the more senior level, making sure that in succession planning, in talent mapping, that people are equally represented and that they're getting development opportunities that are equal, so that the projects, the experiences are equal as they move across. So that's something that we've been doing. We're making progress. We have about 38 to 40% representation in digital technology and analytics. It's not still enough. We still have to go further, but that's some of the work that we're doing. And a lot of it is inclusion training, bias training, making sure people understand and are aware of where they might be discounting someone's experiences or style to make a difference. And I think that's something we have to do to address the problem at every level inside a corporation. But I agree with you as a parent, we also, and as an advertiser, we also have to think about what are the role models and the images that we're putting in front of children, and at a really early stage. So I have girls, they are exposed to no end to imagery that has nothing to do with being successful in STEM, that has nothing to do with dreaming about what's possible, about who they could be, about what they could achieve. They don't have those kinds of examples. And when we're in a media or a marketing or a commercial function, we have to start thinking about what examples are we putting into the world? What examples are we putting in front of our children that allow them to see a future where that's possible? And as someone who, I was an only girl in a drafting class in grade 9, I can hear you around being the only inside a girl, like only girl inside a class full of all boys is not actually great. It's tough. And so good for you for sticking it out, but we have to kind of change that dynamic.
Are you cool if I put you on the spot for a second?
Yes.
Because your stat around the number of women that get promoted stuck with me a little bit. So really quickly, how did you get promoted? I mean, obviously you're SVP, so you're up there. So what was it? Did you have mentors, sponsors? What helped you get to where you are?
I took a lot of risk, actually, and I had sponsors and I had mentors. But I would say the number one thing is I took a lot of risk. I changed companies when things weren't working at one company and I looked for a better job. I changed functions. I moved from marketing into analytics and data science and then back into marketing. And I moved into retail versus banking versus packaged goods. And I would say all of those risks were big at the time. I knew only 40% of what I think I should have probably known to get those jobs. And I had to really push myself and rely on some transferable skills. And I think that's the other thing corporations can do when we think about putting women in leadership roles. There's a lot of transferable skills. You know, to be a leader in technology, you have to be creative. You have to be able to lead large teams, see projects forward. Many functions get to do this. And so why not sort of expand our aperture around who can lead technology functions?
Great, thanks. So Emily, this is over to you. And the thing I love about this panel is that everyone is from a different industry, has a different background, so there's all unique perspectives no matter where you work. So Emily, how do you think equal participation in STEM and equal opportunity is really going to impact the global reset?
Well, I think the most important thing to think about when we think about equal representation of women in science and technology is we cannot change this planet without diverse thinking and diverse innovation. The key to a clean energy future is all about technology and innovation. Decarbonization is not happening fast enough, and we have to accelerate the speed and the rate of change. So when it comes to the gaps in the technology that exist to get us to the decarbonization goals, the 2030 and the 2050 being our big landmarks, and you think about the fact that it took us almost over 70 years to electrify emerging economies in this world, and we have less than 8 years to reach our next milestone in decarbonization, and 20 years after that to a net zero goal. Innovation and technology are super important. And my company, Schneider Electric, is one of many corporations that are racing to get to innovate and develop the technology to be able to meet those goals. You know, we can have targets out there, but if we're missing gaps in technology to achieve that, we're never going to get there. So what are some of the key areas of innovation that we've got to fill? When I think about decarbonization, there's 3 major categories. In my space, in our space as an energy, technology provider, and it's around decentralization, digitization, and electrification. So decentralization, are we developing the green energy generation sources? Yes, we are currently, seeing the solar, the wind, the other distributed energy sources, but we still have a lot of technology needed around advanced energy battery storage and hydrogen fuel cells. When we think about this digitization, we need to be energy efficient in how we do use our energy. So smart grids, smart cities, smart buildings. We need more computer science and digital acumen coming into the workforce, coming out of schools with diversity of thought to be able to innovate the digital technology that we need to have energy efficiency. Schneider Electric, we just invented the first ever the EV charger that connects to a home energy system. We call it it's a home energy management system. We have to have smart homes, and we have to make those, keep speeding up the technology that addresses that. And then finally, when it comes to EV charging, we have to have technology around mass EV charging capabilities across the globe. If we're going to, I don't know about you, but I sat in the BMW panel. It was really exciting. By 2030, they want their entire fleet EV. Oh, we're not prepared, right? So innovation comes from diversity of thought. We don't have 70 years this time to catch up to the goals that we have. And as an engineer, I like to reverse engineer. How do we solve this? We have to have more diversity of thought. More women in engineering, women in STEM brings a diversity of thought when it comes into innovation. I can think of so many times that I've sat in a room with a bunch of engineers, you put them in different groups. The one group that's all looks the same. I've watched them get sort of circling around the same topic and just stuck on that. You get to another group with diversity of gender, diversity of creed. You have background, thought processes. You have all the different ideas that are coming in from different places and very, very different ideas that come forth. So if we're going to change the planet, we have to have equal representation of women in science and technology.
Cool, thanks. AnneMarie, I don't know if you have anything to see, looking like you wanted to add.
Yeah, no, when you say the word energy, I'm cute. So the Department of Energy and throughout the Biden-Harris administration, they've talked a lot about energy justice, right? And how we so badly need this energy transition. We have to rewire our whole society, and literally and metaphorically. And a lot of this, it cannot be done with the same way that it's been done before, because we've made the communities that have contributed the least to the climate crisis are the ones who are bearing the brunt of its impacts. And so we have to rewire our brains too on how we're going to do this. So we have the Energy Justice 40 initiative, which is baked into how we do our programming, where 40% of the benefits or more, that should be the floor, right? The benefits of redoing our energy programming need to go to the communities that have had the biggest impacts from it, and to have them at the table. So they have decision-making authority, they have more community experience. We've brought in regional community liaisons to the Department of Energy, and just retooled our whole way of doing business. And we have this Secretary Advisor on Equity, which is a position that had never existed in the past. Shalana Baker, she's wonderful, and it just is beefing up our staff, beefing up the budget, putting action and money in people where we have these issues, and doing analysis on our own workforce, right? Because what percentage of the Department of Energy is female? Like 36%. So it's not all STEM jobs at my agency, at this federal agency, but a ton of them are. And so we got to start at home too, and diversifying our workforce and being accurate about who we're portraying and who we're bringing in and walking the talk, right? So that's a big part of it. And then lastly, on the international front, because we're in this forum, as I'll mention, our Equity and Energy Transitions Initiative, which is through partnership with the International Energy Agency and the Clean Energy Ministerial. And those are just massive international organizations. And so knowing that those two are pairing up should just give you an idea of the heft of this effort, and trying to bring in more women into the clean energy space and leadership. And they're also hosting events. It's kind of like the C3E one I just talked about before, but internationally. And I helped write the paperwork that stood up that whole thing. And so it's another initiative that's really taking off.
Cool, thanks. So just your words around action, and not just speaking is great. So we're going to do a little bit of a rapid fire. I don't know if most of you know, but the World Women Foundation has invested in 5,000 women in STEM so that they can get in-demand skills in cloud, data, and AI, which is fantastic, so congratulations. So if you were given $50 million to spend, not on yourself, but on something that's going to further equity, I'll start with you, Elizabeth. What would you do with the $50 million?
Yeah, so they talked about this kind of in the last panel, but I do also truly believe that by teaching girls and I guess young females how to code, you're really kind of empowering the next generation. And the reason that I say that is because my school places a really, really big emphasis on research and technology. So I tell absolutely everyone, you should want to do research, whether it's physics research, chem research, something. I wasn't really into any of those subjects. So when they said you have to do research, I remember I was cold emailing professors, and the first one that said yes was a social environment and health lab. So that whole entire year I was working with this lab. We were using data science to evaluate the mechanical stress responses of Black women, basically, in separate types of communities. And that's something that I was really personally interested in. Or computer science, when I first learned to code, the very first thing I was interested in is how can we use computer science to kind of help these underrepresented communities? How can we support women? So my first thing kind of would be teaching young girls how to code, teaching them computer science, and then instilling in them this understanding of innovation, and also kind of showing them all of these different people who are using those resources to create the change again that they want to see. So it has to be centered around technology, things like that.
Cool, that's amazing. And I just have to add that when I was 16, I was not doing any of this. Impressive. So thank you.
I can build off of that. So we're going to partner up, Elizabeth. Okay. So we're going to teach. You're going to figure out with your $50 million to save $50 million. It's not $250 million. Okay. we're going to teach young girls. My ideas were, I think that, and you said this and it came out in the prior panel. Yes, computer science for all has gotten far, but I actually think a lot about data science for all, and I even think more about design thinking for all. And I think there's been a theme here that to really bring this home to, whether it's impacting the community, whether it's impacting gender issues, whether it's impacting the environment, thinking about design thinking, creation, data science, computer science, into a real kind of grounding of how do you design solutions in our own community. So I would use my 50 million twofold. One is to open up a colossal lab, possibly at NYU, but it doesn't have to be, around kind of just a design your life and your world set of concepts. Teaching design thinking is a very doable thing, and I think the more that we can train literally tens of thousands of girls to think about their communities, think about problems they care about, that's important. But then pairing that with a venture capital, pairing that with a challenge fund, pairing that with micro grants or smaller grants. $25 million, if we split it, goes a whole heck of a long way if we're thinking about, a couple $1,000, $10,000, $15,000 for different solutions. So I'm gonna join your team because I think it's a winning team and add to it.
Amazing. Well, I want to be on that team too. But I'm gonna, which is because it sounds amazing. So I agree with everything, and with my additional 50 million, I assume we're just adding it up. I definitely would think we need to do a few things. So we need to invest in female startups, and there's a really big reason for that, and that is around wealth creation. We have to make sure we can fund the next female-founded unicorn. We have to figure out how we can get women to have that kind of wealth and influence, because that's where equity will start to really gain momentum. And so I think we have to really look at how are we enabling and founding early stage startups and allowing them to be successful and to scale. We can't think small, we have to think huge to change this gap. So that would be one area. I think the second one, and this may sound a bit basic, but I think we have to solve the real problems that get in the way of women advancing at work, and it's childcare and household support. And I think we have to really lean in to actually giving high quality, affordable childcare that allows women to be successful at work without trading off being a great parent. And we can't keep asking our partners to clean up the kitchen more often. We might as well fund, some support for women. So I think that would be where I'd spend my money.
Awesome.
I'm really struck that at 2022, you were the only female in your coding class.
Yeah, it's pretty great. Yeah.
So for me, it reminds me of a conversation I heard earlier around confidence. You asked, how did you become an SVP, right? I think so many women, part of promotion is believing that you can get that job. And so much of our confidence is built when we're very, very young. And I just see still so many young women saying, oh, I'm just not good at math and science. And so if I had 50 million to spend, it would be get them while they're young. Like really invest in the early years, the K to 6 ages, as we say in the US, that early stages when they are really formative to help young women believe you can be good at math and science. Invest in creative ways to teach math and science. Maybe we have different styles of learning across the genders so that by the time they are 16, they believe they can do anything. I mean, when I was a kid, I couldn't get my dolls until I'd learned my multiplication tables. My parents were very adamant I was gonna be an engineer. But when I grew up, I had all the confidence in the world because they were telling me that since I was little. And it doesn't just have to be at home, it needs to be at school as well.
Build on these things. So for my $50 million, I would really like to see a whole army of women in STEM who are trained up, ready to go, STEM ambassadors. And we fund their travel, we fund STEM activity toolkits, we fund outreach, we give them a huge platform, and we send them out into schools, toy stores, events, the zoo, whatever, get them in front of where kids are, where young people are, and show off how amazing women in STEM are. If you've heard, this is rooted in some studies that I think the If Then Foundation was funded by Lyda Hill Philanthropies did, but on the Scully effect and how a lot of women and seeing this, who are in STEM, they surveyed, what was your inspiration? And a large percentage of them, I don't want to get the stat wrong, so I won't say the stat, but look it up, a large percentage of them said that they were inspired by the character Scully from the X-Files. And so there's a big need for just to see more of yourselves out there. And when you get the opportunity to talk to a woman in STEM and to see their passion, their excitement, why they're choosing these fields, then that could change someone's life right there. So I want to fund a network of whole STEM ambassadors and get us traveling outside of our comfort zones and trained up and go change the
I
world.
love it, sign me up. I'm all over it. Okay, we're gonna actually do the same question as the last panel, which is if you could give everybody one action to do after leaving. So we're gonna make this really rapid fire. I actually am gonna jump in and say something because someone told me this once and it was really good advice for me, which is ask for what you want. And I think a lot of women don't. And so when we talk about promotion and so on, I would just say you need to ask for what you want. If you need flexible hours to do daycare, ask for it. If you want to get a promotion or move to another role, you really need to ask for it because your manager may not be a mind reader, quite frankly. And so I think the more you can ask for it, the more you'll see results. And then we'll just go down the road.
I'm just gonna go and pass it backwards.
Perfect. Sure.
So I would say for the call to action is tell somebody else about this conference, about this event, about a lesson learned here, because we need to expand who's in the room and get more people paying attention to things. We've all given up a lot of time and effort and funding and whatever, getting ourselves over to this event, and the people who organize it have done a phenomenal job putting everything together. And there's so many people who don't have the opportunity to come to these things who would be, of value to the conversation. And you don't need to be a women in STEM to be an advocate for more women and gender diverse people in STEM. So that's my call.
Awesome.
My call is embrace failure. I like that theme because nothing was invented without failure. So when you think about women in sciences, it's an iterative process. You fail until you succeed. That's how we have to look at life.
So I guess mine would kind of be really supporting, young women, in the sense that, I know when I started coding, I used to I'd tell a few people about it, and there were so many girls who were really interested in it, just because they felt that it was kind of like a field that they couldn't touch. They said, I'm not good at science, I'm not good at math, I can't code, I obviously can't do it, which that's absolutely not true. And I think that what they need is to understand that what we're seeing online isn't necessarily true. Everyone works in different ways, and being able to jump over that learning curve and learn all of these different things is really helpful. So I guess if anything, just keep supporting young girls, especially. And I know I tell girls that are younger than me, especially if they're women of color, even if you hate it, please stick with it, because there's a point where you'll start to like it. And then at that point, I feel like it's a really nice skill to have and something that you can really use to help others.
That's awesome. It's a real privilege to be on a panel with you, Elizabeth. I'm going to cheat, and I'm sorry. I've got two. The first is we all have to insist that the leadership of our organization, whether it's at the board, our managers, our executive leadership, that there's equal representation. Why in God's name are we still talking about this in the year 2022? Sorry, that was an infomercial. My real idea for the call to action is someone mentioned the metaverse in the last conversation. I just think for folks in this room who have access to the 3D environment, thinking about metaverse and kind of the use of that tool to engage, I think it's incredibly important that we make sure that we start on this movement in an equitable fashion, that we start on this new movement in technology in a way that isn't going to be a catch-up in the same way that we're having this conversation, but that we're really engaging, teaching, training young women to be part of that community and to be leaders in that community. Sorry for cheating.
That's good. It's great. These are all so good. I feel. I think my call to action would be to use your buying power. Use your buying power as a consumer. Use your buying power as a customer in a large organization. One of the things we've done that started to gain some traction is insisting that our partners show up with a diverse team. We work with big Microsoft, Adobe, Salesforce, TikTok, Meta. We work with all these companies. Why wouldn't we insist that they bring a diverse team to the table? That allows those women in those organizations to get experience working on large accounts and big problems. They will get the experiences to develop. So I would say use your buying power as a consumer, pick products and companies that do have balanced boards, and also insist on it as a corporation, that your teams that are working with you are diverse.
Love that. That's great. We only have a couple more minutes left. I don't know if anyone has A question?
I'm very, very passionate about this, and I'm trying in my head to condense it to as little questions as possible. So I'm a technical recruiter here in New York City. Our company is global, so we have offices in every city, really. I'm in tech adjacent because it's the business side, but like still in the technical world. As a technical recruiter, I talk to a lot of people who are recent graduates or they've been in their career for a little bit of time. And the market right now is pretty crazy. As well as a lot of people have been, because of the pandemic and everything, they don't have the networking skills or the social skills needed to find the people they need to find really to get their career going. So I was a part of all those programs. I kind of left the coding and the technical world. So this first question would be, what can we do to kind of help young people continue the path after school? My second question, and I thought of it in the beginning, Elizabeth, if you can answer this question. There's a lot of social media influencers around STEM, and around technology specifically, that talk about their experience with like applying to roles or interviewing and things like that. How do you think social media will help advance people's careers?
Has happened for me has happened because of social media. Like I remember I had like a very, very small TikTok account. It was just for my friends. And I posted about something I was coding, and out of nowhere, like I checked back the next day and it had like 20,000 likes. And I was like, I was amazed. But the comments were absolutely filled with, how do I start coding? How do I start coding? How do I start coding? And I think that kind of led like this really, really interesting entryway, because from that then you tell them, oh, this is exactly what I did, and then they go into that. Like for a lot of people, I think now that's kind of what brought me, because at first it was just me sitting in my room like alone because I liked it. But I think from that and from seeing how many people again felt like this was a world that they couldn't touch, like from that, like I posted like 1 or 2 videos on YouTube that were just from like questions that people were asking, like how do you start coding? Because no matter how accessible we think that it is, it definitely isn't. If you don't even know exactly what computer science is, because that's a question too, then you wouldn't even know to try to start. So I think that honestly, like social media kind of is the future for young people to even see exactly what computer science is and see what you can do with it. And I think it's a very, very effective method in helping young people, young students, especially young girls, to understand exactly what they're capable of.
I love that. I think everyone now is on their phone trying to follow you. Your videos.
And I think that's the answer to the first question as well, which is making sure that we are explaining and showing. And again, there are many more tech occupations than coder, but we just keep talking about that, right? And again, coder for what? And so I think that showing these examples through social media in terms of for what, to what end feels really important, and then making sure it's a really diverse slate of folks that are actually doing the talking.
Great. Do we have time for one more question? Sure.
So I love this panel. I wish I could take each one of you home and have a conversation. Maybe next year we could have it just all around STEM, because it's just such a huge important topic. So my question is, Elizabeth, and there were a couple of other people that had this idea around giving your entire money to fund coding, data science, tech, 3D software for young girls, and how transformational that is. So why do you think that more companies like Microsoft are not investing more on that, if to be honest, that is for me an obvious way to just, and I know that there's companies that are investing in girls who code, but there should be more, right?
Can I
add? I would add, like, there's I think techie people are usually not good with social media. They're usually not good with speaking and being a public speaker. So I don't think we have to pressure them to that direction as well. I think what we need to do is bring the companies like Microsoft, just adding to what you're saying, Microsoft, Google, to these kids so that they're inspired, that there's a career path and they know where to go when they grow up.
I'll answer very quickly. I feel like for me, I think my journey in computer science, like if you would have seen me at the beginning, it kind of felt like a long-term investment. Like the very first time I started to code, I didn't understand anything, and it was obvious I wasn't good at math. And then again, I feel like there was a learning curve I had to kind of get over that I didn't feel like my teachers were really helping me with, because I was surrounded in a class of people who got it automatically. So that's why I kind of felt like a little left behind in that space. But I think that maybe the reason that more companies aren't like automatically like pushing a lot of their money towards this is because they don't see the like the potential of it immediately. Like it's something that we're not going to see like very, very instantly exactly how this is going to kind of change the world. But obviously, like I know the Malala Fund released a report on how educating every single girl, having them all have 12 years of education, could do more for climate change than technology ever could, because they have these unique experiences that they can kind of give you. So I think that it's just because it's harder, I feel like. It's just in general a little harder, and you're working with people that you kind of need to help support and that aren't already like, at that position, but it definitely is worth it.
If I could just jump in for a second, as someone who works at Microsoft, I know that the tech companies are investing, but I think the reality is, there's a lot more to do, and I think it can't just be one industry, right? It has to be industry working with academics, working with government, working with people all around the world. So I feel like we are all doing investing in the area, but how are we actually all partnering together and really making sure that we're having an impact, again, right across all industries? Because I also feel like for a long time, people thought tech was a separate industry. The reality now is that every job is a tech job. And so every single industry needs to invest in tech and in STEM because there's a lot of developers, there's a lot of cybersecurity experts that are required within your organization. So I feel like we have started, but there's a lot more we should do, and we've got to do it right across all industries and with government as well.
And it is actually a marketing problem. We have a marketing problem about making this fun for kids at a young enough age and making it accessible enough so that it doesn't feel foreign and not interesting, because no one wants to do something that isn't fun. And so I think we can probably just make it more interesting and better for kids to make it more accessible. They did some great work with Doja Cat on TikTok and helping kids learn to code, girls learn to code. It's fantastic. But those are the kinds of programs that will change people's perception.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, I think we are out of time. I'm getting the signal. So thank you, everyone. This has been fantastic. Thanks to all my panelists. Thanks for listening.